Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Tal Senior. I'm going to talk to you about mechanics, process, and best practices in requesting Epic data. I can personally attest to the value that somebody with Dr. Orenstein's skill set brings to the table in taking an idea that they have for a research study and being able to actually see the benefit of that with the actual data that they've mined themselves. Where I come in is I'm usually on the data side where somebody's already formulated a question and then they've put in a data request and not being able to get the data themselves, and then they come to my team and we work with them to fulfill it. So I can personally attest to how powerful it is coming in and being able to run those queries yourself. I've been with Children's for just about 18 years. I started off on 5 East at Eggleston. I joined the Epic project team when we went from paper documentation, paper flow sheets, orders, notes, converted all that into Epic. And then in 2010, I joined Business Intelligence and have been doing data and reporting solutions since then. I've got a team of developers and business analysts that who are Epic certified and are basically querying Epic all day, fulfilling all kinds of data requests, whether it be for quality, for research, operational, financial, across the entire organization, as well as many cross-institutional collaboratives as well. So if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this presentation, I would say that line up there that says data@choa.org. Okay, you can always reach out to that if you're not sure. If you've got a data question, you're not sure what to do, you can always just email that and we'll point you in the right direction. That comes to me, that comes to my team, and we try to respond as quickly as possible. So even if you don't take anything away from this, get that and we'll get you in the right direction. That being said, I'm going to put a shameless plug here for a tool that we developed, because before you come to us with a data request, it's important to know what's available, what's at your disposal, what's out there already. Because technically speaking, when we get a data request, the first thing we want to do is use the existing tools that we've got to try to fulfill it. That helps us, that helps you, gets you the data much quicker. So created a tool called the Analytics Catalog, which documents a lot of the existing data tools that are available that are outside of Epic, that, like Pop Disco, Dr. Orenstein references in there, as well as some of the other dashboards that are used, whether it be for quality or whether it be for operational uses. I've got the path here and the link. Essentially, you have to be on the Children's Network in order to access it, and the tool will actually tell you also if you've got access to it and ways you can go about requesting access, should there be a tool that you'd be interested in. The other tool that's available for seeing what's out there is within Hyperspace. Epic has a tool called the Analytics Catalog. And the way you get to that is, if not sure how many of you have a Radar dashboard as your default homepage, but when you click on that arrow drop down, there's a button that says Show Catalog, and you can see, just keyword search what you want. The other way to do it is do that chart search on the top right-hand corner. You just type in search, type in Analytics Catalog, and you'll get the same thing. Now, given that, our fellows, much of the work that you're going to be doing, research-based, you likely won't be able to fill it completely with one of the apps or one of the tools that's already pre-existing. Maybe there's some data elements that are that you're looking at that are unique and cross different areas that aren't necessarily mashed up all together in one of the existing tools, which is usually the case. So you're likely going to need to put in a data request for us to write a custom query for you so that we can pull it out. Or maybe you've got the data that's in one of those tools, but it's not presented in a way that you can consume it. Maybe that unit of analysis that Dr. Orenstein was talking about, it isn't quite there the way that you want to consume it. So I'm going to show you exactly how you can go about putting in the data request, but essentially prior to putting in the data request, this is kind of the checklist that you need to kind of make sure that you've got prior to requesting data. requirements. You need to know what you're going to look at. We'll talk a little bit more about what and how your requirements should be structured in just a little bit, but essentially for your research request, you're going to require a children's sponsor who's typically somebody that's kind of on staff at Children's who kind of sanctions your request. Need to have an IRB letter, an exemption letter, data use agreement if applicable, and then a protocol. If you're unsure about any one of those items for your particular request, you can always reach out to irb@choa.org, and they can help you determine what you need for to get your data. And then, of course, money always helps. So if you've got funding associated with your request, we can expedite your request, and we can get that data to you quicker if you've got some funding associated with that. And then once you've got all those things in order, essentially it's time to submit. So let's talk about the requirements a little bit. And essentially this is where you need to determine what your population is based on. Going back to those slides that Dr. Orenstein had, you know, what piece of structured data do you want to use to identify your data set? So things like our diagnosis codes, is it, you know, are the diagnosis codes coming from a problem list? Is it coming from the coded diagnosis? Are we basing your population based on administered meds, labs, orders, etc.? Any one of those pieces of information would be considered structured data, easy to get to, to put your data set together. Also going back to what Dr. Orenstein showed, that more complex, you know, natural language processing, we want to avoid any type of wildcard or fuzzy search, you know, things that are like embedded deep within a note somewhere of, you know, some, you know, obscure condition that isn't otherwise captured discreetly. You wouldn't want to base your population based on something like that. It's just too onerous, too much of a too inefficient for a query to get to, you know, for that type of search. So if you've got your structured data, you know what you're going after. You want to know what date range you want that based on. You want to know what hospital locations it's for, whether it be one hospital or the other. Maybe it's for a specific clinic. Maybe it's for the entire system. And then what exclusions do you want to bake into your data as well? Maybe there's certain scenarios that you know that you don't want included. We get that in there as well. The other way we can go about defining your population is with a maybe you're coming to us with a you know, spreadsheet. Maybe you've kept track of your patients. You've got a patient list that you've compiled yourself, and you'd like us to run a query based on that patient list. We can certainly do it that way. There's some, you know, challenges sometimes with the reliability, the accuracy of the data that gets, you know, manually entered in there. You know, it's subject to typos. So that's why generally we ask for some identifiers that we can match on, like an MRN or a date of birth or an address or a last name, something like that. But that is certainly, folks have definitely come to us, you know, a lot with, you know, here's my patient list. Here are the variables that I want you to pull out for each of these patients. So we can certainly do it that way. So once you get your requirements, you know, your population set, you want to think about what you want your output to be. Going back to, again, the unit of analysis, what do you want each row of data to represent? Very important to determine that. As I like to think of that, it's kind of like, what's your end game? And what we typically do is we tell folks to mock up what they want in Excel. It's an extremely powerful tool to get a sense of, like, you know, maybe you can just mock up your data prior to actually coming to us, so you have a sense of kind of the way you want it to look. What we want to do with the output is, you know, if let's say there's a calculation or there's something that you're trying to scoring that you're trying to do, typically want to avoid having the underlying query that we're writing, do all that calculation for you. That can lead to you know, development time taking longer. It is doable within, you know, certain circumstances, but generally speaking, like GLI indexes, FEV1s, or non-epic scoring, we kind of tend to want to stay away from. And then once we have your display elements, what you actually want to see in the output worked out, to determine, well, do you want to see it as a summary? Do you want to see it in detail? We can certainly aggregate things for you. Typically, when folks want an aggregate, there's always questions of people generally want to see the detail behind it. So figuring out what are those data pieces that are important to you in your detailed data. What we've seen with research studies, because there's generally many data elements that are requested as a result of that, and then going back to that unit of analysis, sometimes what we'll do is we'll break the data out into like parts. So for example, if you're looking at this example layout here, we've got a tab for visits, demographics, ADT, admissions, discharges, and transfers, notes, orders. And there's one-to-many relationships across these as you're looking at a particular hospital visit. So this is where we would create all your visits within the time frame that you're looking for, where each row represents a visit, and then where one visit can have many notes. Your notes tab will compile all your notes, and then we'll create a key between the two, where like the visit ID or like the hospital account number that you can use to kind of cross-reference that, okay, these notes apply to this visit that occurred here. If we don't do it this way, what happens is within one-to-many relationship, your cardinality in your data is just very confusing and very difficult to digest. So this is typically what's been very helpful for folks to see when there's multiple areas of the patient visit that they want to look at. This is just an example of just a mock-up in Excel, just a very basic one. This screenshot at the bottom here is what we call a reporting portal report, where we can certainly, most of the time for research requests, we're typically providing Excel files. Usually folks are typically happy with just a one-time Excel file, but what we can do is we can actually stand that query up as a self-service report. When we talk about requirements, you can provide us what your inputs are, what your parameters are, and then once we stand it up for you, you can go and run it at whatever, at will. You just have to be on the CHOA network in order to be able to access it. And then of course that report you can you can export to Excel if you want to manipulate it that way. Any questions with regards to requirements or putting together, the output that you desire or anything like that? Okay.
So this looks like a lot of work, and I want to relate that to when you said the funding expedite things. How much are you talking?
So I believe the fee structure that we currently have, and I can send that to you, and you can get that out. Essentially, you get 10 hours of work up front, and I believe the fee that we're charging is $1,000 to get 10 hours of work. And for most requests, that usually suffices. And then obviously, as once that query is written, you come back to us with any questions. We'll support you. We'll continue working with you to further develop that. So, any other questions? Okay, so how do you put in the request? So you have to be on the CHOA network to be able to put in the request. At the end of the day, if you get to data@choa.org, we'll get you to the right place. But essentially, you can get there through CareForce. You can search for data analysis request. The direct link is here as well. This is what the request form looks like. It pre-populates some information. You can tie it to a particular IT project. For research requests, it's typically not going to be the case. You can request on behalf of somebody else. This is where you would also determine, you would also specify if this is a financial request, operational, but generally speaking for this group, it's going to be a clinical research request. Enter your title, your description, your hypothesis, just to kind of give us some additional information as we review these. And then probably the most important piece is that for each data request that we receive, we have to just give the organization some visibility as to what's being requested. So for each area of the hospital, there are leaders. There's the operational leaders, and then there's the section chiefs. So we have them listed. Essentially, pick the one that suits you best. Generally speaking, these are the folks whose the data is sort of like within their domain. So if it's like, the main thing you're looking at is lab data, so you're going to want to pick the lab person. At the end of the day, if you just pick somebody, we'll make sure it gets routed for their appropriate approvals. But generally speaking, having done this for over a decade, 99% of our data requests get approved. So this should not be a barrier. It's more just around the visibility for the organization and just giving leaders the opportunity to ask questions should there be. But generally speaking, the requests are approved. There's some medical records folks that also have some visibility as well. But like I said, there shouldn't be any problem with those getting through unless there's something untoward. So you put in your data request, you get a notification that pops up that says, hey, you've successfully submitted. So what happens next? That comes to my team, and we assign a requirements analyst to it who will reach out to you. Regardless of how much detail you put in there, we will set time with you to kind of talk through the requirements, make sure that we establish that, yes, we know what you want. We're in agreement, and then the requirements analyst will put together all the documentation for a developer who will put that query together for you. Generally speaking, like I said, we usually provide the data in Excel. We can only, if the data has PHI in it, we can only send it to a choa.org address. There are other ways for us to get it to you if you're not using that choa.org address, but generally speaking, that's kind of the mandate that we follow. And then once we get it to you, essentially we're in a validation process until you kind of give us a final sign off of, yes, this is exactly what I want. Then we close out the request. But then you can always put in a modification request, or we'll support you in whatever we provide to you and answer your questions and follow up. So we're there to support you. Any questions with any of that process? People usually ask about turnaround time. So once we, it's funded request, we get you in nice and quickly. We'll generally turn around. We'll get you your data within 2 weeks. Once we have all your requirements vetted, and it isn't some like crazy, 2,000 data fields that you guys are looking for. But typical research requests we easily, quickly fulfill within 2 weeks. That's our general time. Yep. Yeah. Maybe it could be items related to performance, or one practice versus another practice at the various hospitals. Those are the ones that come to mind, but those are very few and far between. It's just not the cultures here. Yeah. Oh, yes, thank you. I can go back to that. Thank you. I meant to mention that. There is limited statistical support available. I say that it's limited. We do put that on there because it's just good for us to know. There are people that have that expertise. Generally speaking, I believe it's the Corp that usually provides that. Okay. Yeah.
If they're going to use our support, you want to put them up and say yes, and then put it in the
yeah. And then, or in the requirements meeting, bring that up and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to be using. And we can certainly facilitate that in the conversation. That's good. That's a good question. I meant to say that. All right. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you.